We're in a time, let's face it, where people are just being flogged with negativity and bad news and toxicity and just elevating to hatred. And what we want for this podcast is be positive as a mantra, as an attitude, as something that we can call out in those moments where we're challenged and remind ourselves that we do have optimism, hope, and encouragement. And so we invite you in. Enjoy the Be Positive podcast and enjoy hope, optimism, and encouragement.
The genders are different. They're wired
It's
different.
not all blended together, this
No.
mishmash?
No.
Can't believe it.
You know, for 5,000 years, it's been pretty straightforward. Generally speaking, in 94% of the population. Tell me the points in your lifeline where you really felt like that was me, or I really enjoyed that, or and maybe it's just, you know what? You need to make a transition out of what you're doing now and into some things that really give you joy. I always tell a lot of people this, but I say the least objective person about you is you. But sometimes men idealize things that they get involved in, and they expect it to be one linear line, straight on the yellow brick road to success, when that's not life.
Welcome back to Be Positive. This is the home, Kenny, of optimism, hope, and encouragement. We're sitting at Lion Air Museum, and our backdrop, the Fuddy Duddy, one of three remaining B-17 flying fortresses that are still airworthy. And I for many years, with spending time with General Lion, tried to talk my way into this plane as it was going out to be exercised. General, maybe I can help you into the plane. General, maybe I can help you out of the plane. General,
that work?
Not once.
Yeah, no.
Rats. So here we are. We're talking about your role, and I described in our last episode, understanding you are professionally a mental health professional, but in my eyes, looking at you as a coach that can lead, guide, and direct, and that can course correct when, as I described, stupid finds me. And so there's a role, right? But I see it so often, and especially with men today, where we were talking in our last episode about confusion, and I want to follow that up with some focus on clarity. And we spoke about risk and adventurers and these components that are confusing in our world today. There's also some typecast roles for men being protectors and providers. Are those mandates? Do we need to be protectors and providers to fulfill
I think there is
role?
I think there is a built-in hard wiring. The genders are different. You know, men are wired
It's
different.
not all blended together, this
No.
mishmash?
No.
Can't believe it.
No, it's not. And again, especially when things are quote-unquote so fluid, for 5,000 years, it's been pretty straightforward, and that's not to discount same-sex attraction or very valid, things that happen. However, generally speaking, in 94% of the population, you do have a breakdown of male and female, some pretty trackable hormonal drivers. You have progesterone, you have testosterone, you have an expression that relates to male and female that is predictable, in terms of how we bond, how we relate. That's what's great about behavioral science, is that you can observe, just like, Jane Goodall observed the gorillas for National Geographic, and you can connect the dots, and you can tie that psychologically, physiologically, biologically, and you can make assumptions, there. So that's a basis. There is a very well-established basis for behavior, and I'll leave it there.
Yeah. With your testimony, married 37 years, you've been coaching and guiding and leading men for your career. Do you still get to these spots of who would have thunk, I thought I'd seen everything and now I haven't? Or have you seen everything?
Seen a lot.
Yeah.
Seen a lot. And I think that's comforting, because there's There's nothing that any man can say to me that they've done or they're experiencing that I haven't seen before.
Yeah.
So I can always say, you won't make me run away. There's nothing you can tell me that surprises me. And whatever it is that you're encountering is not fatal or final.
Not fatal or final.
Right. Because
it's just a moment.
Well, because negative emotions, emotions are like dashboard lights on a car. It just lets you know something's going on. My check engine light comes on, my oil light comes on. But your feelings aren't always the facts. And I think that is the biggest threat, especially to men in their 20s and 30s, is they let their feelings be facts. I mean, we have seen a spike in male suicide like we have never seen before. Just throw in a global pandemic, but feelings are feelings. They're valid, but they're not the facts. And a lot of times, especially, because I've had two brothers commit suicide. It's usually a belief in that is rooted in a feeling and an emotion that then gets presumed to be the fact. Like, gosh, this is fatal. I'll never recover from that.
It's done.
It's done. I'm done. Where do I go from here? And that's a lie. And I know it's a lie because I've helped people out of those slimy pits but when you have negative emotions on the inside, those negative emotions are both blinding and isolating.
Yeah.
They isolate us. So to answer your question, I think people feel unique in their pain and suffering when they're not. And it's so good to hear you're not alone in that. And it's just that men are like icebergs. You only see the tip.
Right.
We're so image conscious that we never get vulnerable or transparent. But C.S. Lewis has a great quote. He says, brotherhood happens when one man says to another, "What? You too?"
Yeah.
And
there's that level of camaraderie.
I've taken over 500,000 surveys from the conferences that I've done, and the number one comment is not, "Man, Kenny Luck, that guy is a really good speaker." That's not the number one comment. The number one comment is, "I didn't realize I wasn't alone."
Yeah.
Because when I'm talking about these common denominators in guys' lives, men are like icebergs. You only see the tip. What's underneath the waterline is universal across humanity. But somehow we believe this lie like, man, I'm the only one going through this thing.
Yeah.
And it's totally not true.
Not true. It's Satan's lie.
Yeah.
It sets this up perfectly because I want to get clarity.
Yeah.
I want to talk about clarity, but I want to approach it from 4 different directions.
Okay.
And so putting on that coach's cap, if you will.
Yeah.
A man is looking outward, looking at the landscape and feeling hopeless, not hope-filled. How would you coach them? What would you say to the person that's just looking at the field of competition and going like, I can't do this?
Yeah, well, I always, because I work with professional athletes too, and they go through slumps. Everybody goes through slumps.
Right.
I mean, an MLB player steps up to the plate. If he's really, really good, he gets on base 1 out of 3 times. Yeah. And I like to kind of challenge how they think about themselves, because usually it's a hiccup, but it's a powerful one. Usually it's a bump in the road. It's not what they expected. The uninterrupted things that happen to us and the unwelcome things that happen and the unscripted things that happen, those can push you off your mark pretty hard. You've been pushed off your mark.
I have.
You've had some life events. I've had some life events really hard. Confusion, hopelessness, And I always kind of go back to when I'm working with people who they're looking out and they're like, man, where do I go? What do I do? This is hopeless. You just have to ask some simple questions that they aren't asking themselves, which is, well, tell me what you've done to this point, and you can identify in their lifeline. Tell me the points in your lifeline where you really felt like that was me, or I really enjoyed that, or and maybe it's just, you know what? You need to make a transition out of what you're doing now and into some things that really give you joy, But the least, I always tell men this, I always tell a lot of people this, but I say the least objective person about you is you. That's why it's helpful to find best friends, counselors, pastors, people who don't have skin in your emotional game, because you're not objective most of the time
Yeah.
when you're thinking about yourself. And so when someone says they're hopeless, I know that's not true. There is bad things that happen, but it's not all bad. And then there's good things that happen, and it's not all good. Life is good and bad. People are good and bad. Marriages are good and bad. Families are good and bad. Organizations are good and bad. Bosses are good and bad. So it's all about our expectations. But sometimes men idealize things that they get involved in, and they expect it to be one linear line straight on the yellow brick road to success, when that's not life. Life is cycles of growth, unwelcomed, unscripted things happen, growing through those things, and then you grow out of them and you come out of those things differently, and now you're a little more grown up, and then you keep growing, and then something else happens, a challenge, an event, a pain, a suicide.
Yeah.
Wow. And I mean, I remember I remember your phone call.
Yeah.
When I was taking my daughter to prom, and you called me on my cell phone in the car, and I came to the hospital.
Yeah.
But we walked through it. And it wasn't the end. And look at you now, Rob. You're just helping so many people. And, I hope it's okay to just be in reality for a sec. I'm so proud of you. What you're doing, you and Deborah, just how you're helping people with this podcast. And, it's now that that's a part of your story, and I have that in my life too, it really shapes us, and it gives us a new tenderness, a new compassion, a new clarity. There's a lot of clarity in pain.
And there's those flashpoints.
Yeah,
And for
totally.
those that don't know, what Kenny is referencing is being shoulder to shoulder as we fought for my daughter's life.
Yeah, we
And
did.
ultimately learned after the fact, after she passed, that she had committed suicide.
Yeah.
And that looking outward obviously is stemmed from my personal experience. There were flashpoints where I was looking out and going, God, I can't do this.
Right.
Or how can I do this? Or how do you expect me to do this?
Right.
Where I didn't have clarity.
No, and in those moments, you're actually, and I tell people this, especially if they're people of faith, if they're Christ followers, that you're actually living out the gospel. Because no one looking at the best guy that ever walked the planet being tortured and crucified looked at that and said, oh yeah, that makes sense. That makes a whole lot of sense. It disillusioned the disciples. It disillusioned everybody around. It's like, why him? So, but was God there? Yes, he was. Was God at work? Yes, he was. Was God going to redeem that? Yes, he did. And for those who believe, we're all going to heaven because of what happened there. But that was disillusioning, confusing. But there is even purpose in those disillusioning and confusing moments that we can't see. And that's what calls out for belief in a God who can redeem even the worst inhumanities and injustices and tragedies and losses. Yeah.
Let me change direction. Literally from looking outward, and you're in that space of grasping it, clarity. What about looking inward?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with that? How do you coach somebody to actually dive deep inside? You were talking about a marriage, and I triggered a story, an experience. Pastor Kenton B. Shore married us, and we were going through our premarital counseling, and he asked the question, Rob, do you know what the problem is with second marriages? And I go, no. What's the problem? He says, the problem is you show up. Bringing in all the same baggage, all the garbage, all the habits and hurts and hang-ups, just a different relationship. So looking inward, how do you coach people there?
When you talk about looking inward, what you're talking about is looking at the heart. And the heart symbolically is thoughts, emotions, and will. And then you have to decide, well, where do I have agency? Okay, I don't have an agency when it comes to emotions. Like I can't sit with you right now and conjure anger. And I don't have agency in the area of will and willpower because, just look at New Year's resolutions and look at, but I do have agency in how I think about
You
myself.
do have ownership.
I do have ownership. I do have a choice there, and that's where we are and we become what we think and we do what we think. That, and so that's where this little thing with an amygdala, a hippocampus, a hypothalamus, and a fornix, and 100 billion neurons. It is the most powerful processor ever created.
The most powerful weapon. Here we sit in the backdrop
Yes.
of the fuddy-duddy. The most powerful weapon.
Oh yeah,
For good or bad.
for good or bad.
Is right upstairs.
And so that's why you gotta really, when you look inward, you gotta ask yourself, well, why do I think that? And is that true? And you have to have a filter. You have to really manage your thought life and filter the input that you're getting through the filter of, is it true or is that a lie? Because when you let in thoughts and then you attach belief to those thoughts, your brain creates neurons around that belief, which impact the will, which impact behavior. So, when you look inward and you go, okay, how am I thinking about this? Is that right? I should get some counsel on that. I should get God's mind on that. I should get maybe a counselor's mind on that. I should ask, am I thinking right about this? And I think that is, but that is the key in a lot of the things that we're talking about today, especially with respect to clarity, because when you have a firm grip on, I know that I know that I know that that is true. Now, will that truth be tested? Sure, because there's lots of other perspectives, but I know that I know that I know that this is true, and I'm sticking with that. You know what that's called? A conviction.
Yeah.
You believe that this is true, and then you start to live out that truth in your life, and that creates a consistency and it creates an integrity. I think where confusion comes in is when we tolerate all beliefs and then we have no convictions. Everything's true. Everything's good for you. Everything's good for everybody else. No, that's not how life works. There are some things that are absolutely true.
So
always 100% of the time.
So let's pivot from
Look inward and evaluate how you think and what you allow into that brain that goes from a cognitive thought to an attachment and becomes a belief, because if you live out that belief, it becomes a conviction and a way of being.
So
what's your source?
Let me pivot to that source then, the master of conviction,
Yeah.
the next direction in terms of looking
Yeah.
upward.
Yeah.
In people that have maybe are hurting in mighty ways.
Yeah.
And you mention the name of Jesus and they go, no, stop, Kenny. I don't want
Yeah.
any of that Jesus stuff.
Yeah.
How do you encourage or coach people to look upward?
Well, you know what? First of all, I understand why. Because there's a lot out there that is not Jesus, that is being proclaimed that it is Jesus. And so you got to go to the source.
Yeah.
And I always like to use the words of Jesus, and if Jesus doesn't suffer, I have a big problem with God, because I suffer. But he became a part of our story. I was telling an attorney I was talking to about Jesus, who's not a believer. He grew up atheist, and but we sat on a plane and we were talking about fatherhood and being a good dad. And so we got into this discussion, and he's called me 3 times. We've had breakfast, and we're now having a discussion about God. And he goes, I grew up, I didn't have any religious background whatsoever. So, this is all new to me. And I said, when I mention the word Jesus, what comes to your mind? It's just like, a really great moral guy. I said, well, that's not what he says about himself. So it's important that you get a very clear picture of what Jesus says about himself and what the Bible says about Jesus. Jesus came and entered the human story to become like us so that we could connect with him. And that's where suffering, we kind of divorce our own when we suffer, we think, no, I have this unique experience and it's mine, and you're going to talk to me about God and Jesus, and that's all pie in the sky stuff. No,
Rainbows and
yeah,
unicorns.
rainbows and unicorns, and no, what you have is you have God entering the story. So back to my breakfast with my attorney, I said, "You familiar with LaGuardia Airport?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "It's named after Fiorello LaGuardia. He was a judge during the Depression in New York City, and a guy came and was busted for stealing bread to try to provide for his family. And so he was caught. He was guilty of a crime, and he had to pay a fine and be punished." So LaGuardia slams the gavel and says, "Okay, you're guilty." But then he stands up, takes off his robe as a judge, and enters this man's life as a citizen, enters this man's story, takes out his wallet, pays his fine, and says, "No man should be without bread for his family." And I was talking to this attorney, and I said, "You understand that picture, right? Can you imagine being in court and a judge slams the gavel and sentences this person to a fine, and then gets up and goes and pays the fine for that person because he has compassion on that person?" I said, that's what God did.
Yeah.
God became a part of our story. He's perfect. We're not. I think we all can agree with that. And that's a problem for the relationship. And so he went and paid the price of our imperfection and sin through Jesus on the cross. And he was just like, and what was great was watching his mind connect the dots.
Yeah.
It was like, oh,
Live.
okay.
Yeah.
So how does that relate to suffering? It relates to suffering because Jesus came and suffered as we do. He became a man, and he lived a life, and he was rejected. He was hungry. He, the Bible says, experienced every temptation that we do, and so that's where, when you think about it that way, wow, God wrote himself into our story to solve our problem. Wow, it's beautiful. It's redemptive, and then we get the privilege as followers of Christ and people who know and have experienced that to go get involved in other people's stories and reproduce it.
Is there you mentioned compassion. Is there a deficit of compassion today,
Yes.
or is compassion misdirected?
Yeah. Compassion in broader culture is a reflection of the level of self-absorption.
Self-absorption.
You'll never meet a self-absorbed, compassionate person. But we're trained to look at our screen, look at ourselves, compare ourselves, compete with what we see. And so I would say in any age, because of the information age, and again, breakthroughs in different ages of time, whether it's the combustion age, the industrial age, the age of enlightenment, the information age, it's people's attachment to it, but there is an attachment in the digital age to self that I've never seen.
Yeah. Unprecedented.
Unprecedented attachment to self. And so when you have people isolated and thinking about themselves and putting up pictures of themselves all the time, and there's a lot of thinking about self, and how do you think about others when you're thinking about you? And so again, this is all about inner formation, what we allow in our minds, how we think about ourselves. But man, when you see compassion and you experience compassion, it stands out.
It stands out. It's a differentiator.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's why it's good to intentionally, that's why I love taking men's communities to Haiti. I like taking men's communities to Ensenada and building houses for other people. And people get to agent compassion. And man, it changes you.
Yeah.
And it changes other people. And so I want to be, and I'll tell you, for lonely people traveling a road of hopelessness, compassion on the road of loneliness and suffering is like water in the desert. And to be able to agent that, and all it takes is, how you doing?
Yeah.
What do you need? And hang around for the answer.
Yeah. I've shared that story in terms of asking how you're doing, right? The
Yeah.
opener for every
Yeah.
conversation.
We're all
How you
mental
doing?
health professionals.
And but
How you doing?
I charge people to ask that question 3 times.
Yeah.
How you
Right?
doing? And
No,
the
how you
immediate
doing?
answer is fine. I'm
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
No, how
It's
you
all
doing?
good.
Well, I'm pretty good. No,
Yeah.
really, how you doing?
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
Yeah.
So it breaks down, and men put up all of these storefronts, all these
Can I
facades.
give you a quick so you don't have to do it 3 times?
I want to hear it.
Hey Rob, how you feeling?
Hmm.
Because that question,
Cut right to the core.
oh yeah, you just
Yeah.
go, how you feeling today? What are you feeling? Because then you have to identify what's going on the inside.
Yeah. Brilliant.
I'm feeling pretty good. Yeah, things are going good. Just like overwhelmed. They will give you an answer that describes their heart condition.
Mm-hmm.
Really sad
Yeah.
right now. Just today, really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Coach Kenny Luck, take us one more direction.
Yeah.
Looking outward. Excuse me. Yeah, looking outward, looking
Yeah.
inward, looking upward. Now looking forward.
Yeah.
How you coaching up men to look forward?
Yeah. To look
And
at it.
not just from a
Yeah.
survival standpoint of like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
going to get through this,
Right.
but with enthusiasm and excitement and being hope-filled instead of hopeless.
Yeah. And this is where I really tap into I tap into my faith a lot on this one. Um, when you're a created thing. So let's say you're a manufacturer and you create a product. You have an intention for the product that you created, right? There is an intention to be used, to be integrated, to be. Human beings are created. I mean, we can go on the deep dive on that, but your DNA is computer code. Ask a coder. They code for a button so that when they press it, something happens. The greatest computer code ever written is your DNA.
So when you tell a man that you're created
Yeah,
for
you're
a
created.
specific purpose,
Yeah, for a specific, it's purpose. Because people feel that.
do they buy it or do they go,
do.
well, not me?
Well, no, they do. It's all about how you frame it.
Mm-hmm.
But they're searching for significance.
There's a
you know?
pearl. Yeah, searching for
Yeah,
significance.
everybody's searching. They want to be great. They don't want to just take up space. That's when people get depressed.
Yeah.
When they're not living out some kind of purpose, like what's my value here? What am I just taking up space? Does anybody see me? What's the purpose of existence? These are large philosophical, metaphysical questions that everybody asks. And when you don't get answers, that's when you really go down a dark, slippery slope. But looking forward, it's like if I believe that I'm created and there's an intention behind me being created, I got to discover who the creator is and what his intention is. And you know what I love about Jesus is that he boils it down pretty good. He just said, you know what? You should get to know your creator and love him and let him love you back. And you should love people the way he loves you. Okay. That's pretty broad. Yeah, but it is expressed in many different ways.
Yeah.
Right? And so, looking forward, it's always, when you're like, what's your hope? Like a lot of times when I'm coaching people, whether they believe or don't believe, I'm just like, if you could wave a wand and and resources weren't an obstacle, what would you be doing right now? And so you tap into this, oh man, you tap into their dream and it's like, oh, well, you know what? I would be in this field and I'd be doing something related to that. And I'm just like, well, what are you doing now? Well, I'm doing this. Is it in any way related to this beautiful picture that you just painted for me? Well, maybe you should start doing maybe some baby steps in the direction of that dream.
Yeah.
Rather than languishing in a field or space that has nothing to do with what really energizes you.
Yeah.
And that takes courage. Sometimes it takes a little pay cut. But man, the income that starts to flow into a person's heart when they're doing something that they really are passionate about, you can't put a number on that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a perfect way to close, and I appreciate that. Those directions.
Ask someone to wave a wand and go, this. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
what's
handing
this
you
look
the
like?
elder wand.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm handing you Dumbledore's wand, and you can just kind of create this future for yourself. And let's be let's be semi-realistic. What would you be doing?
Yeah.
What would it look like? Identify it.
If you knew you couldn't fail.
Yeah, if you knew you couldn't fail, what would it? And then now we can start building a simple roadmap. You know, you talk to that person. You start maybe volunteering in this space. Blah blah blah.
Yeah, love that. We have to do this again, and I love looking at through your eyes, looking outward, looking inward, looking upward, and looking forward, and embracing life. Not just enduring it or surviving it or,
Yeah.
gosh, what am I doing in life? Well, I'm just getting older. Kinds of benign lifestyle. I think this is where, going back to your purpose, the word that resonated when you were talking about that, you're chosen.
Yes.
You are chosen to do this. It's not just floating out there in anonymity. You are chosen.
That's the real adventure, Rob. I mean, God created us to do good.
Yeah.
You know?
And you're doing good. Kenny Luck, the master coach. I'm going to bill you as the master coach. I appreciate the time together, and we have to do this again.
Yeah, we will. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks for being with BePositive, the home of optimism, hope, and encouragement. And we're hoping you're feeling all of that as we listen to Kenny and spend time with him. Thanks for joining us on the BePositive podcast. You can find us at YouTube, Spotify, Apple, on social media at BePositive Cause, or at our website, bepositive.life. This is the home of optimism, hope, and encouragement. We invite you to join us and become an ambassador of optimism.